Susan Messing, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for coming over, John.
Yeah, no problem.
That's very nice of you to come over on your day off.
Well, there's no days off when improv is your
Is your moral guide. Oh, God bless.
My first question to you is
Why?
Yeah, why?
Why haven't they killed you yet? Because if they did, there'd be somebody celebrating.
Why a career in improv? No, they say public speaking is the number one fear that people have.
Oh. Really?
Yeah. Over death.
Public speaking over being chased out of your home by fire?
I mean, I don't know how specific
over Hitler if he were still alive?
Public speaking.
Public speaking. Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
At what age did you realize that being the center of attention wasn't a big deal for you?
I don't see it as that per se.
Sure.
Like, how old were you when? I think my whole life has been about being brave, which is having fear and doing it anyway.
Yeah.
So even like in 2015, I had to give a TED Talk and I had to memorize my own words, which were just so gross.
Right.
And maybe 2014, I can't remember, or something around there. I did one for the University of Chicago. And I was fucking terrified. But I was like, okay, little hypocrite, you're telling how to, you're teaching people how to deal with fear. Mm-hmm. Your turn again. So I guess I guess it was not something that I discovered there was an age, but how comfortable you were with handling fear.
Yeah, sure.
So I guess I've always thought that being brave or having fear is something to conquer, and that even though it never ends, that I'm still willing to put myself in the fire. Because I've discovered, through my husband being sick and then a pandemic, that I don't need to be in front of a lot of people. Like, don't care.
Right.
Like, don't care. I mean, I get enough doing a show or teaching people. That's enough public chunk of time that I'm with. Mm-hmm. And even after the pandemic, the Annoyance had a soft opening. And I remember turning to a student and saying, kindly, but saying, I'm so sorry, I have no small talk left. Do you know what I mean? Like, that feeling of just like...
Your social battery being drained.
Oh, it's not even just like that I've discovered I'm an introvert, but that I'm just not good at it.
Sure.
I mean, maybe I work it every day so that I get better at it, but it's not natural to me. I don't think any of this shit's natural to any of us. I think if we all had our dithers, we would probably be curling up in a corner with our favorite snack and crying, naked, sobbing on a cold tile floor, right? I mean, am I the only one?
But some people are naturally funny.
Yeah, well, naturally funny doesn't mean necessarily they want to do it in front of a bunch of people.
That's very true.
Some of my funniest friends are nowhere near comedy, and they're nowhere near public speaking.
Right.
But it definitely is something that you can learn to manage. Mm-hmm. That is something that I'm always figuring out ways to nip and tuck. And when I figure out something that makes myself feel better, then I share it immediately so that other people can suffer less than I do. I'm basically like, you send me out to make sure there's no sharks in the water. And then when I go, oh yeah, I got bit on the leg, I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have covered myself in blood. Guys, don't cover yourself in blood, because they like that.
Was your family funny growing up?
My dad was super funny. My dad was the funniest person I ever met, but he was super dry. It was the kind of funny that you had to kind of lean in and go, are you making a joke or are you serious?
Right.
That was my dad. And I will say this to my mother's credit, because my parents had a really long, shitty divorce. He was funny until it was cruel. And then I think I learned at a very young age about what it is to punch up and punch down.
Sure.
So I think that if my dad were still alive, God rest his soul, or my father used to say, had to bury him dead, Yeah, right? And then I was like, this is funny until he died. But I don't know. I just don't think that it's... I learned a lot about how to protect content through my dad, because had he been alive now, I think he would have been a trumper. I think he would have gotten that kind of cruel and that kind of sense of entitlement that people who have more than others have.
Growing up in New Jersey, was Northwestern always your plan?
No, I didn't know anything about anything in the Midwest. Everything to me was like East Coast.
Sure.
So what happened is the summer between my junior and senior year, my mother suggested I go to something called the National High School Institute.
Okay.
They call us cherubs, the people who attend, I guess, because their behavior is horrible. But what it is it's an intensive 5-week program in things like forensics, not forensic medicine, but like speaking, I guess, which we really didn't have debate shit in my school, but theater and music and a bunch of stuff. Basically, the Northwestern campus for 5 weeks is kind of overrun by these students.
Okay.
My mother had been a journalism cherub when she was the summer between her junior and senior year, so she suggested this program. So I went to it and I fell in love with Northwestern. I didn't know it existed. I also am a little wary of colleges that say like the Harvard of the Midwest. I'm like, shut the fuck up. And besides, if there's a Harvard of the Midwest, it's going to be University of Chicago, not Northwestern. No offense. Northwestern had a good loophole in their application process where they weren't going to kick you out for a lack of talent. They knew who I was. My grades at the time were certainly good enough. My test scores must have made me look like I was special ed because they were bad, but I always had good grades. I was a good student, a good solid student, and you didn't have to audition because if they did, they'd kind of be like, one of the things about Northwestern is it looks like a conservatory, but you do have to take broad-based liberal arts classes. But from 2 p.m. on, if you have to do crew, they own you. So we had our labor. We had it nice and tight. And they would say things to you like, see that asbestos-covered lighting cord that you're wrapping so well? You do that. You sure you don't want to be in lighting? Because they're looking at you like you will never be an actor. The people who came to Northwestern who were great were great. I don't know if people had epiphanies as students there. Although my teacher, David Downs, was brilliant, I didn't even understand what the fuck he was talking about until after I graduated. And then I went, oh, now I get it. It was improv, me taking the doggy door, that made me stay in the arts. And it did make my acting better. It did make my communication skills better.
Right.
Applied improvisation changes a lot. So I mean, improv sort of saved me as an artist.
Sure.
I think because my mother would probably rather I turned into the clinical child psychologist that I could have been and probably been very good at it.
So when you went to Northwestern, was the plan liberal arts or was the plan?
No, so I was in the theater department. I was in the
Okay.
school. I guess they call it was the School of Speech before. Now it's called the School of Communication. But I got a bachelor in science in theater. Meanwhile, my best friend from high school, Leslie, got a bachelor of arts in science at Harvard. So go figure. She's a doctor and she didn't get a bachelor of science. I never understood that. So, but I was a theater major and good luck to me. And then after I graduated, I discovered improv and I was like, oh, you don't have to butcher Shakespeare and Ibsen and Chekhov. You leave that to the experts.
Right.
You get to do make-em-ups, which is really all you wanted to do.
Right.
So
Well,
I didn't know that, but then I discovered that.
Sure. Were you nervous moving from New Jersey to Chicago?
No, it was kind of natural because since when you do like the baby steps, then when you take the big step, you're like, oh, like for me, like I could move back to LA, poor LA, I love them so much, but I could move back to LA anytime because I know the layout. For me, it's kind of knowing where you are.
Sure.
And because I had done the National High School Institute, I already knew Northwestern. Because I was at Northwestern, I was entering Chicago, so everything seemed like the next rational step to take for me.
Sure.
Granted, I got there and didn't know what the fuck I was doing,
Right.
but I kind of thought, you know what, sometimes you create your fate and sometimes it's revealed. In my case, I followed the revelation as much as I followed any sort of guideline. Because I feel like if you set this is my goal and it has to be achieved at this time. If you don't get that goal, then you get to be disappointed. And I'm going, but your path is your path. That's yours.
Right.
So why would you say that your path is any less valid than somebody else's just because it's not done in what you perceive to be a normal kind of cycle, right?
Yeah, that's true. A lot of people can't take a step back and realize when they're in the struggle. That's the beautiful part of it.
Yeah, it's exciting.
It's the journey.
Look, as long as you don't hurt anyone else or yourself, and that includes your feelings, that's the way. That's the only rule I've ever had in this house.
Yeah.
Is we don't hurt anyone else, and that includes their feelings. And you have to kind of take care of yourself and stop berating yourself. I'm not saying I was confident because I sure as hell wasn't.
Right.
And Sharna laughs at me all like she's like, you were so hypersensitive and you cried all the time. I'm like, because you were a cunt. Like, and that's why I'm a nice teacher, because she was a cunt. And so we laugh about it. I mean, we've literally laughed at each other on panels so much that we're like almost crying. We're like doubled over laughing so hard. But she will not take away that I was hypersensitive, and I will not take away that she was a cunt. I have a feeling I was just sensitive, not hypersensitive.
One night when you were at Northwestern, you were invited to go to I.O.
When I was at Northwestern, I actually heard of this audition. It was for a place called Improv Olympic, and they were putting together a college team. My friend Ann Halliday was on it, Stephen Colbert was on it, a bunch of people were on it. I did not make that team.
Right.
For some reason, I just remembered that in the back of my mind, just like I had auditioned for the comedy show at Northwestern only once. It's called The Meow Show, and it's had 50 years of lots of success. And I did get it. And the guy who was the producer that year was a man named Dan Patterson, who started a show called Whose Line Is It Anyway? Yeah. So, you know what I mean? Like, so these things intersected. I'm not saying I was successful, because I wasn't. I wasn't invited to be anything. I wasn't even invited to audition. I just heard about it. So that didn't happen in college. I just like... I did some shows. I was probably terrible at them, but they knew I would rip out my hair in large tufts trying. And so thankfully I was somewhat castable. But once I graduated, I thought, well, I was doing some shows, not very well, and I remembered that place called Improv Olympic, and I thought, well, why not just take a class there?
Yeah.
Like, why don't I see what this is about? This is not about making an audition. I don't even know what improv really is, so let's just try that out. And then when I started doing it, I went, oh, like everyone who falls down the rabbit hole, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I want to continue this.
Right.
No matter how much I struggle, no matter how hard it is, no matter how bad it is, because once you've seen that first show that's incredible, you're like, that's what I want. Now, granted, 80 to 90% of them are horrible, but that 20 to 10% of greatness, you're like, that's what I want, right? What was your first show that you saw that made you go, doing it?
Well, I came up in comedy sports.
Right.
And there was so many shows. I was lucky that our manager... he also ran the Shakespeare company in town, so the emphasis...
They improvise Shakespeare?
No, just Shakespeare in general.
Oh, I didn't know there was a Shakespeare in general show. Learn something new every day.
This is in the Quad Cities.
Oh!
Yeah, I'm from the Quad Cities.
I thought you were from outside O'Hare.
Oh, no. And so the emphasis was always on the show first. A synchronicity between Mr. Voice and the keyboardist and everyone working together to build the show.
It's a collaboration.
Yeah.
So you already had that feel of, ooh, I get to be an integral part of a community. Oh my God, once you find that, when you find your people, and then your people just keep expanding and you're like, oh, this person's from another country, but they're still our people. Yeah.
How did you find out, like, what was your first thing when it was, like, improv? And you're like, what's improv? How did you...
It would be that audition sophomore year.
So you went into the audition not knowing what improv really was?
Make-em-ups? I don't know what the fuck it was. I was a theater major.
Awesome.
And I was a terrible actress. So when I found out I didn't have to memorize something, I mean, I guess I knew I was funny, but I also knew very quickly in improv that if you stand around and say funny things... you have to heighten it by being funnier, and good fucking luck with that. So believe me, I learned quickly, but it was a baptism by fire.
Sure, absolutely.
You see it, you're like, what the fuck is this? You want to know the machinations behind it, you know, and then you kind of immerse yourself and you're like, oh fuck, I'm fucked for my life.
My story's kind of similar, where my grandma used to send me articles on how to improve my life. And on the back of one of those articles was auditions for comedy sports. So I was like, okay, let me audition for that. And
your grandma did it, man. my grandma gave me a noodle kugel. She would have not known about this.
She didn't either. It just happened to be, it was fate that Comedy Sports was on the back of this thing.
Look, even if she thought that you weren't confident, and it
Right.
would give you confidence, not that this would be your life's journey setting up 2 cameras
Right.
in my house, yeah. And codifying all this. This guy's preserving history. If I die tomorrow, my daughter will be glad to see me.
Don't die tomorrow.
Thanks for the cross. Otherwise, you'd have to do like this. That doesn't work as well. The cross is easy. Although I'm a Jew by name, not necessarily through action.
I made that Comedy Sports team without knowing what improv was. And I was like, okay, I might be good at this.
Yeah, you are. If you fucking get in for okay. I'm comfortable in my spine.
Yeah.
Bring it. I like people. Yeah. Good for you. That's amazing.
So was IO what you expected? And who was your first teacher?
Your first teacher at IO was always Sharna.
Okay.
And then your second teacher was a guy named John Harazal. And then your third teacher was a man named Del Close. I had John Harazal twice because Del was playing, I think, Polonius in a Wisdom Bridge production of Hamlet. And then I had Del. And you pretty much were required to do that for the rest of your life, is still study with Del, I think. I was only 5 years old when I came in. So it still was pretty young, pretty raw when you look at the work now.
Sure.
But, God, the people who were in it were amazing.
Right.
Amazing. Like, the team that it wasn't Barron's Barracudas for me. Everybody's got a home team that they go, that's the team that made me want to do this more. The team that made me, blew my mind was a team called Grime and Punishment.
Okay.
And that was Dave Rosowski, Dave Pasquazi, Mick Napier, Rich Label, Madeline Long was sometimes there as well. She was really good. And who else? I think that might be it. Yeah. And Tim Meadows.
Oh,
well,
wow.
God, I can't believe I forgot Timmy, because he was funny as hell. And that was the team. They did this one show that blew me away so hard that I was like, this has to be written.
Right.
It's literally the perfect live discovered sketch.
Mm-hmm.
It blew my mind. So even when you suck, when you see something that's great,
Mm-hmm.
it's the one thing that fuels you. So if that's what fueled me, God bless.
Absolutely. What's an improv rule that you held close to you, that you followed for so long, and then the older you got, you realized that it was kind of bullshit and you threw it away?
It's pretty much most of them. Because I don't know, maybe I have a tiny bit of oppositional disorder. Maybe that's why I made the annoyance so interesting to me, that I understand that every building that I'm in, I want to honor. So I don't go in, it's like, I don't go into your house and shit on your floor.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I don't go into your house and shit. I mean, I want to, but I don't. No, I'm not going to do it. Anyway, but the point being is that I understand, you know what? Look, so many people have disproved rules to me that even yes and, even when I just started class at University of Chicago again, and it's really basic, because 18 out of 20 people will not land in comedy, and they just want a good internship interview or be able to look their Trump relatives in the face at Thanksgiving and talk about golden retrievers, So, or make eye contact, for Christ's sakes, it's a lot of people are going through shit. But one of the things I said is, I like yes and only because sometimes you do start with a really stupid idea, but then you build, and now you're somewhere Technicolor, and you wouldn't be there without that stupid idea, which is now gone. It was just the beginning. It was just an initiation. It's not what the fucking scene is about.
Right.
So I'm not a big fan of who, what, where, because I believe if you give me a teeny bit of specificity, I'll get off on it. But it is nice to agree on fact. For example, if it's 72 degrees, you get to disagree because, you were raised in Florida and it's too cold for you.
Yeah.
But for me, I have menopause, so 72 is too hot. So I have no problem with any of, I love opinion, but fact makes it a little easier.
I can't pull myself away.